Welcome to the Three Questions webcast series. I'm Wayne Baxter, Executive Director with One Capital Management. At One Capital Management, we develop and implement strategies that enable our clients to grow, protect, and ultimately distribute their wealth. And we do that by offering investment wealth management services. Thank you for taking time to check us out. Now, my clients are often referred to as cross-border clients. Now, why is that? Well, it's because they're either U.S. or Canadian residents who wish to invest in U.S. and or Canadian dollar-denominated securities like stocks, bonds, and ETFs. Our process for advising our clients includes an in-depth discovery and diagnostic analysis of their wealth management goals and objectives. Wealth management, as you know, is multifaceted. There are several areas beyond investment and retirement planning that need to be discussed and considered. At One Capital Management, we call that process advanced planning. Under the advanced planning umbrella, we include an in-depth risk management review, or if you prefer, a review of non-investment risks that a family will likely face as time goes by. One risk that you will want to prepare for is the financial impact resulting from when you're required long-term care, either in your home or in an outside facility. Long-term care services may be required when you're not able to independently perform two or more activities of daily living, or ADLs. Now, these ADLs include bathing, clothing, feeding, toileting, transferring in or out of bed. Or potentially, long-term care services may be required if you are diagnosed with a cognitive illness, such as dementia or Alzheimer's. On this edition of the webcast, we'll be asking the three questions you should ask about long-term care planning. Joining me is Lisa Mayfield. Lisa is the founder and principal of Seattle, Washington-based Aging Wisdom. Lisa is a trained and licensed mental health counselor, a geriatric mental health specialist, and is certified aging life care professional. Hi, Lisa. Thank you for joining the Three Questions webcast today. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Wayne. Appreciate you whoa.
Yeah, so I really appreciate you making time for us, and obviously, you're pretty passionate about the aging space. You've been involved in it for over 20 years now. I thought before we got into our three questions, you could maybe just let our audience know a little bit about Aging Wisdom.
Thank you, Wayne. It's a pleasure being here. Well, Aging Wisdom is a care management company, and what that means is we help families navigate transitions with aging, whether people are having their own health issues or changes in memory, or maybe it's an adult child trying to support their parent who they see as aging. We help navigate those changes and help families understand the transitions. I'm also part of a professional association, so I think it's important for your listeners to know that I'm in Seattle, but there's people like me all over the country that they can access, and we'll tell them how later in our conversation.
So potentially when people are watching us today or listening, and they have some interest, they could contact you, and if they're not in the Washington area, that you could connect them with another subject matter expert in your field somewhere else in the United States.
Absolutely. I'm always happy to do that.
All right. So, I guess we should probably get on to the questions. And, what I really appreciate the fact that, being a baby boomer, it's nice to know that we have professionals like yourself that are going to help us make the necessary changes and proactively plan for the future, right? And that really, Lisa, is why I wanted to have you join us today, because you're a true expert in the space of long-term care planning. And we both know that it's a very complex topic. I mean, I was thinking about it in preparation for today. Nobody would want this, but we probably could do a 20-hour webcast on long-term care planning. It's a pretty detailed topic. But, for today's webcast, let's just start with the basics. It sounds like, I think, probably a good place for us to start. And we can maybe potentially do some additional webcasts down the road, just sort of expand on where we're going. But for today, let's just start with the three questions you should ask about long-term care planning. And I think the most obvious first question is, if it is determined that I need care, is it a certainty that I'll have to move? What do you think about that? What's your thoughts on that question?
That's a great question, Wayne. And if you asked the majority of baby boomers' parents, they would have said, I'm never leaving my house and I will leave in what did they say, a box. But I think baby boomers will actually think differently about moving, and the idea of having somebody cook for them, clean for them, plan their activities, and drive them around might seem a little bit more appealing. But it is an important question. Do you have to move? Maybe a recent retiree is thinking, oh my God, I'm never moving into a retirement community. Will I ever have to? And I think the answer in general is no. What people have to think about is, do they have the financial resources to stay at home? Because often staying at home when you need a lot of help can be the most expensive option. But if people have plenty of financial resources, then there's other things they can think about. Like, what is their house like? Is it accessible? Do they have a lot of stairs? How much of a yard do they have to keep up and maintain? Thinking about, even how do you take out your garbage? What's the path to, often people taking out their garbage have rickety stairs in the back of their porch they have to go down and walk down an uneven sidewalk. So thinking about how the house would be set up for aging, also how much it would be to maintain just the inside of the house, but also the outside. I think often people forget that when they're starting to decline, eventually driving won't be realistic. So trying to think about where you're located and how close you are to being able to reach services that you might need, your doctor, where you get your hair cut, things you like to do for fun. But also, if you're a social person like you, Wayne, it seems like you enjoy connecting with others and being around people.
Definitely.
Like, how would people feel at home isolated when you're not able to get out and around others? And that isolation, I think in COVID, we really found out how significant it can be to for people not to be around others. So even though it seems like staying at home might be the best choice, there's a lot of factors to keep in mind to really think, is it kind of home sweet home?
Well, that is why we have you on today's webcast to bring these insights because, the old school thought, and I know you've heard this and in the training and all kind of the programs and courses I've taken over the year talk about the fact that, baby boomers are those, who are, in their 70s, early 80s, their number one priority is to age in place. Nobody wants to be, you know, institutionalized, I guess is a term that's used often. But you make a really good point that there are a lot of other factors that need to be considered just in the fact that you have the comfort of living in your own home. There's a lot of other moving parts that need to be considered. And that is why planning is so important, planning in advance instead of waiting for the, a good friend of mine used to say, Wayne, you either act or be acted upon. And this is definitely a topic where you want to not be acted upon.
Right. That's a great quote for this topic because that's so true that if people in their 70s were thinking ahead and meeting with someone like myself to say, someday if I need help, what are the options? What would it cost? What should I be thinking about? Then determining what might make the best sense for them, letting their families know so they know that, then they can go off on their life having fun, doing the traveling, knowing that they've kind of created that plan. They know what they want to happen versus exactly, they don't plan. And then, unfortunately, they might have a stroke or some memory changes might happen or a diagnosis like Parkinson's that nobody plans for that happens to us. And then the care is forced upon you without even having thought about what your preferences would be.
And I'll add to that, there's also, you mentioned earlier about having the resources or the means to afford to remain, in a facility, in your home, pardon me. And, that's where that other part of planning goes. And the irony of our discussion today is earlier today, I met with a couple who are now at that phase that we were actually talking about, early 70s, and living, and their home, as they outlined to me, is really set up already for potentially the future needs. So they've got the property has bars like for in all the bathrooms where there's like they can get in and out of the washrooms and bathtubs and toilets and everything kind of set that way. The plugs are properly in the right levels, and in their view, it's set up for aging, right? But there's another factor that we talked about, and that is the capital required for them to remain in place. So a part of what we're going to do in that case is we're going to take a look at where they live and what the expected cost would be for in-home and or assisted living care, and see if they have the financial resources on hand to be able to allow them to be able to remain there just from a financial perspective. So there's not just the, I guess you would call what you were talking about, the qualitative aspects of remaining in your home, but there's also the quantitative. There's a quantitative aspect, which segues perfectly into our second question, which is what are the costs related to long-term care, either in home or in a facility? We kind of lined that up perfectly. So maybe you want to share your thoughts on how to consider the costs.
And one resource that I think can be helpful for people is Genworth Financial does a cost of care survey each year that people can look for online, and you can put in your zip code or your city and look at what the actual costs are in your area. And it looks like you're aware of that resource because you're nodding. So I will kind of quote the costs here in Seattle, and they're probably fairly comparable to other cities across the country. But if people live outside of a city, the costs will be sometimes pretty significantly less than the cost that I'll reference, which will probably scare a lot of the people listening today. And costs have really gone up in these last 2 years, I think, like everything in life, but particularly because of the labor shortage in this industry, the costs have really substantially increased. So staying at home, you can get caregivers who come to your home to help with care. You mentioned earlier if you need help with dressing or bathing or maybe light housekeeping or showering, getting in and out of a chair, a caregiver can come to your house and help with that. And they can come for a little bit of time, or they could come and stay the whole day. So you could theoretically have caregivers in your house round the clock, or you could just have them for 4 hours a day if you just need a little bit of help. If you have a spouse or partner, they're often assisting in many ways, and maybe they just need a little bit of help to get a break or get respite. So in Seattle, I would say the cost can vary from 25 to, I would say now, $50 an hour. Often the less you have a caregiver, the fewer hours, the higher the hourly rate. The more hours you have a caregiver, the hourly rate would decrease, if that makes sense. So the higher end, the $50 an hour, would be for somebody working, I would say, 6 hours or less. So if somebody's needing care all, 24/7 around the clock in our area, it's 15 to 20,000 a month. So if you're the math guy, not me, but if you multiply that by a year and by, several years, it becomes a substantial amount of money.
Right, exactly, and again, this is why, I guess the line is those who fail to plan to fail. So the idea is to, while you're still healthy, while you're still going about your day to day lives, this is when you actually start to do that kind of forecasting and prepare for the potential for assisted living costs, or costs of moving into an assisted living facility that will help support you. And again, the key is not leave this to the last minute, which again leads us to the third question: is what do I have to do now so that I'm not a burden on my family in the future? And I will add to that question that one of the key criteria that I've discovered and working with families over many years of in this industry is that when you ask people, like, what is your intention for your later lives, they say, well, I want to remain in home, I want to be independent, and I don't want to be a burden on my children. That's frequently a concern. And I've seen recently, and actually in my own family, the impact of having a loved one go through a difficult situation, and the impact it has on the family. And it's really sad sometimes to see that the amount of stress that having a family member go through a health event, especially when they're elderly, can have on individuals, and how it can impact the dynamics and the relationships between family members. It's not easy. So again, back to that initial context of act rather than be acted upon. What would you think, from your point of view, would be the to-do list now, so that you're not going to be a burden on your family in the future?
Well, the first thing I would recommend is meeting with their attorney to make sure they've done their estate planning documents, which would include their power of attorney documents, naming people who would jump in and assist for them with healthcare or financial decisions if they're no longer able to, making sure they've done their advance directives or living will, where you spell out what you would like to have happen or not at the end of life. And that package usually includes your will as well. Most people think of a will, but in our opinion, the power of attorney document and advance directive is far more important.
You're preaching to the choir, Lisa. Definitely.
And many people might have done them years ago, but they haven't even thought about, oh, who did I name as my power of attorney? Did I have a backup? Was it effective immediately? Was it upon incapacity? So, really pulling out those documents to remind yourself what you did and is it still relevant?
And I could also just to add to that, I was on a Zoom call with a client back in Canada earlier this week, and that situation was they wanted to update their wills in Canada because the relationship they had with one of the powers of attorney had been let's just say they're not on the same good terms they used to be, right? So, I mean, it may be that it's a family member that you would naturally think, I'd want to have as my power of attorney. But as we know, situations, I guess the old line is time passes and things change, right? So, I would say just as a general rule of thumb, and not to get too far off the track here, but when it comes to your will and power of attorneys, like you said, I would recommend probably every 2 years just taking a look at who you have in place and probably every 5 years reviewing with your attorney. So I couldn't agree more with your first suggestion. Any other thoughts you'd like to share on that?
I just wanted to add something because people who don't have children will often panic about who would I name as a power of attorney if I don't have children. And I just wanted people listening to know that there are professionals that will serve as powers of attorney.
Yeah.
Sometimes people with kids would rather have a professional. And then there are times you might name somebody more distant, like an aunt or a neighbor or a friend, but you're worried about all the work that would be involved with them being a power of attorney. That's when you can engage someone like myself that can actually be boots on the ground, helping coordinate care and medical care and really doing the work of a healthcare power of attorney, but having someone else guide that care. So I want to make sure people know those resources are out there. So first thing is meeting with the attorney. The second is meeting with your financial advisor because so much of this topic involves money. And do you have the resources? How do we make your resources work? How do we create plans that are sustainable within your resources? And the financial advisor is a great person to help you look at your legal documents and the whole picture financially. Maybe you have long-term care insurance, they can help you understand that. So I think that's the second thing to do is regroup with your financial advisor. And if you don't have a good one, get a good one who can do some of these projections for you and help in your planning. And I think the third thing is engage somebody like myself, an aging life care professional or care manager, so you can really understand what are all the options, what costs can I expect given my situation, my personality, my health, my finances, my preferences, helping you create a plan. And I think knowledge is power. So just understanding what's out there creates a lot of decreases the stress about this topic of aging. And then if I'd add a fourth thing, I would say, then if you do have children, kind of regroup with them, take an opportunity to have a conversation about all of this topic, your preferences, all that you've accomplished. And often I know, and you can speak to this, Wayne, sometimes financial advisors will encourage clients to have their children involved in these conversations so everyone's on the same page in their planning. And do you want to add any more about that?
Yeah, well, I agree with everything you said. I think the key thing about the planning aspect is not waiting for until you're too long. I mean, I think I was thinking more from your standpoint. Uh, that discussion that you talked about that someone would have with you, uh, it, I know there's no time better than the present. I guess would be the obvious potential answer, but if someone is, I'm going to make up a hypothetical here. They're just retired, mid 60s, everything's going well. They're into the exciting, time of their lives now. Is that too soon in your opinion, or like, is there a specific age? Like, how do you kind of gauge when it's time to have that discussion with someone like yourself?
It's interesting, Wayne. I've had my business 19 years, and I always say for like 15 of them, I was always helping baby boomers with their parents. And now
Right,
it's shifting to helping baby boomers themselves.
right.
And many of the people that we're working with are proactively planning. So they are thinking ahead. And I love working with those types of clients that aren't in the crisis. They want to prevent that crisis. So I think a newly retired person, late 60s, early to mid 70s is the perfect age. It's usually one meeting where we have a conversation very much like this, explaining the resources and helping them create a plan. And even if people want to stay at home, there's ways that we can add a little bit of help to make staying at home much more realistic with a fraction of the cost of if somebody might move. So getting those tips as well. And some people might decide they want to stay at home, but downsizing might make more sense. And they get rid of their giant house, maybe move into a condo. So there's all kinds of options if people are in that position. And then when I meet with them, I'll tell them, you did all this, check, now go have fun, enjoy your life, travel.
Right. And I think you're just talking about selling your home and moving to a condo. Then you get into having to bring in the CPA involved because we could potentially have a tax event as well. So again, it's better to plan in advance instead of just waiting to the last minute. Now we've included your contact information here because obviously I'm expecting that we're gonna probably have some people who are going to want to talk to you. So now we've listed all of the ways to contact. Do you have a preference for how people should contact you out of your email address, your website, your phone number? Is there a preference?
Emailing is a great way to reach me. Also, if you're interested in getting connected with somebody like me elsewhere, emailing is the easiest way for me to help in that way. And then our website even has a way to schedule an appointment with one of my colleagues to understand and learn about our services. So that's a great way to get connected as well, or sending me an email.
Lisa, I want to thank you for making time for our webcast today. We covered a lot of ground in a fairly quick period of time, and I think we did a great job of asking the 3 questions that you should ask when thinking about planning for long-term care. So I want to thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Wayne. I'm just grateful you're talking about aging.
That's what we do here. And we probably should talk about a second or follow-up webcast, and we can maybe expand on this topic. Because admittedly today was a bit sort of the what we call it kind of the basics, but I'm sure we can get into the weeds a bit further the next time.
Happy to do that.
Thank you, Lisa. Lisa Mayfield is the founder and principal of Seattle, Washington-based Aging Wisdom. Again, thanks a lot for her time today. I look forward to bringing you the 3 Questions webcast, and I hope you find them educational and informative. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our YouTube channel. And to receive notification of when our latest webcast has been posted, please click on the notifications bell. Now, lastly, to schedule an online Zoom consultation with me to discuss your wealth management needs, please click on the link in the description box below, www.onecapital.com/meetwithwayne. Thank you and see you soon.